So yes, I'm Anna. I was born in Hong Kong, moved to Sydney when I was 5. I grew up in the hills, went to a Chinese church with my Christian family. I studied at Sydney University. I worked for 2 years in a medical device company. Then I got married to Derek, and 3 months later, we both moved into college at SMBC and lived for a few years on campus there. He did a few Presbyterian subjects, and then he did a last year at Christ College in 2016. So in 2017, we moved here to Temora with Calvin, who was born in the last semester of SMBC. And then at that point, we were expecting Abigail, and Valerie was born at the beginning of last year. So almost 5, 3, and 1-year-old.
Fantastic. And Anna, can you tell us a little bit about what life's been like for you this year? Obviously, all of us have had a different year than we anticipated at the start. Just got 5 questions for you. Can you tell us a bit about what life has looked like for your family this year with the implications of COVID? What's been hard about this season? What's been something that's been good about this season? What's something that God's been teaching you in the specific COVID season? Maybe something that might have made you cry and something that's made you laugh. So 5 questions to reflect on the crazy COVID year we've had.
So I guess hard in terms of there's been a lot of change from our normal routines. So we were just getting used to, which days was preschool and daycare, and our usual activities then got thrown out the window. So 3 kids, 4 and under, can get a little bit crazy sometimes. At first we had lots of new ideas, and then they kind of fizzled out, and we just kind of did what came. And then there were changes at church, needing to keep up with all the news to see what's going on. And even though it wasn't my job, but just bouncing ideas with Derek and making the most of the opportunities. And then, realizing afterwards that lockdown week is one of the most stressful weeks because you're making a million decisions at the same time, and hoping everything goes right. What's been good about the season is, I think, seeing the kids play together. So they've grown up a lot in that time, and it's the last year that there'll be 3 of them before Calvin heads off to school next year. Otherwise, I've been doing lots of little organising, small project fixes, fixing shelves and cupboards, rewiring broken electrical toys, but also thinking about the core of church, how to support our church family, and making more calls and getting people to try and call in or call on each other a bit more. So they've been good things. What's God been teaching me? I think sometimes I'm an extrovert, although I like my own time as well. But since that time is taken away, I think I'm looking a bit more at myself and into why I do the things that I do, and sometimes why I get upset, or if there's certain things that I'd like done and it doesn't happen for whatever reason, I realize that I end up blaming people or being selfish. And so I think more than anything, God's been pointing out the sin in my life, but also just knowing that He is the one who is in control. Jesus is the one who gives peace in every situation, and knowing that He really does drive everything. Often I'm conscious that when I step out the door, there's people looking, and I know God's looking, but even in my private moments at home, when we think no one is looking, He really does see everything. So the crying question, I had to think about the crying and the laughing a little bit, because I'm a pretty steady as she goes type person, so it takes a little bit to rock me. But I remember I was in the 4th middle of the night change of sheets, alternating with 2 different children at that point. And Derek had gone away overnight, had surgery, and just come back. And so Derek very graciously helped out then when I thought I just had enough of changing wet bed sheets. And one thing that's made me laugh, so a couple of weeks back I was making some face masks just in case, and I had that plastic waterproof layer, which was an old fabric reusable bag, and I knew not to iron it too hot or to use a spare cloth, and just straighten it out a bit. And I thought, what's the point in ironing a towel or a scrappy piece of cloth? Why not do two things at once? Iron something that actually needs ironing. So I got out Derek's newest dress shirt, which was a bit wrinkled, and put that on top. And I thought, I'd better not let this get too hot, otherwise it might get a little bit messy. So, I'm ironing, and I thought it was all going well. It's almost finished. And then, it turns out that dress shirts are not actually that thick. And so I pressed later, and this black plastic had burned a hole, burned off this and onto the dress shirt. But I managed to run into the bathroom and scrub it off and got all the black gunk off it. So I guess it was, I was thinking, let's not do this. And then the thing that I was thinking turned out to actually happen.
It has been so crazy this year. I found the things you find yourself doing and the things you find yourself talking about, discussing with friends, that's a nice, face mask. And where did you get that one? And different smells of hand sanitizer. Like, you just think, who would have thought 12 months ago that these were the sorts of things that would have been occupying our time? Yeah, but you're right. It's good to be to have a laugh about some of them as well. So Anna, can you maybe talk to us a little bit about your decision, yours and Derek's decision to go to Temora, and maybe you can explain to us where Temora is, because if anyone's like me, I'm a terrible Sydney-sider who isn't very familiar at times with smaller country towns. So maybe describing a bit about what Temora's like, and really what were some of your reasons, I guess, in going there for ministry, and what were important steps along the way for you and Derek in thinking through the kinds of ministry that you'd be doing and how you ended up where you are now?
So yes, we're in Temora. It's in regional New South Wales. It's an hour north of Wagga, so about 5 hours from Sydney. It's got 4,000 people. It's a big farming area, canola wheat belt. The town is into aviation as well the last couple of decades. We've got Woolworths, McDonald's and IGA. They're the three big, and Harvey Norman. They're the franchises that people would know. Everything else is a small business. So the year Derek was finishing, we were looking for a church to go to and a new job. And there were three options. One was Sydney, another was a brand new church plant, and the third was pastoring this congregation at Temora. So immediately we ruled out Sydney, because when I went to Sydney Uni in the Evangelical Union, they launched a campaign to go where it's less reached, less resourced, LRLR. So they tried to encourage Christians to go somewhere LRLR, whether it's overseas or a different city, a regional area, a less resourced place in Sydney, or just the next suburb, to see these places as mission fields, and to think about picking the place where you serve, and then finding a church or a job, a house to live in, not just looking at where you live or work first, but to think about where you wanted to serve first. So I guess that's been in the back of my mind for the last 10 years. And so although Derek went to a different university and he didn't get exposed to less reached, less resourced firsthand, I think we discussed it a lot, and we didn't want to lock ourselves into, a particular place or a style of ministry yet. Whether that's FOMO or lack of commitment back then is another matter. But also just being open to that God might use us in a different place, in somewhere we weren't quite expecting, and to send us somewhere. So at college, we were open to the possibility of mission fields overseas, and looked into different options weekly and different types of ministry or different parts of the world. But we weren't particularly, convinced about a place or a ministry or a type of ministry. So I didn't think we were convicted to leave Australia. But by the end of college, I think we decided we weren't going to stay in Sydney. We looked into a few options, other cities like Adelaide or Brisbane. We did a short placement in Darwin, and we were open to leaving Sydney because we knew that there were good, solid Bible churches, 10 minutes in any direction. And Derek's mentors had mentors who were a bit more in pastoral care and support type roles. So I think he naturally leaned towards that rather than church planting in terms of personality. So, when we came and checked out Temora, we had to Google it in the, maps and say, where is Temora? came for a visit, and it seemed a good fit. I think initially we thought it was a little smaller than we'd like, because we're both big city type people. He was born and raised there, but the town and country living, I think, have grown on us. And we get our share of eating food and culture and the visits to the city, and then we're good for a couple of months.
That's really interesting, Anna. Yeah, it's really helpful to hear just the various steps along the way. Yeah, for you and Derek, and just the thinking and the processing, the way that God has been leading you to where you are now, and just the thought that that's taken. So is that right, that you moved to Temora back in 2017?
Yes.
Is that right? So can you maybe just talk to us about how have you and Derek, how have you intentionally set up roots and settled yourself and tried to make connections, in this small country town that you're in now?
So I think in the community, we just tried a whole bunch of different things. I guess like lapping up experiences in a sort of deliberate way. I joined 3 playgroup, mainly music groups, in the first couple of years just to meet people. It was a little bit draining sometimes. I since joined the town band, the CWA. There's a bunch of us who play Pokemon together, trying to meet people at preschools, garage sales. I know it might seem like a lot, but at that point we had no preschool kids when we first moved into town, and we didn't do sport or have kids that did sport, which is really big. And so, we had to get into some of these groups just to meet other people and to, have a little bit of routine, to have an outing for the day. And Derek joined the men's movie night and the men's shed. They both had a little bit of hurdles, not being in the core group, he wouldn't get messages or invites, and he'd turn up and the movie night had been moved to a different week, and then he'd come home. Or, when he first turned up to the men's shed, they were like, "What are you doing?" He was just starting to tinker in woodwork. And so I think the men's shed is more for older men in town, and the men's movie nights for some of the younger men and farmers. And I think there's a little bit of a awkward tension with the younger men. He doesn't quite gel and fit in there, but I think it's an odd tension he enjoys, and he knows that he should meet some of those men as well. So that was community. In church, we just tried to meet everyone and have a chat over a meal or a cup of tea. Initially it was writing down everyone's names, who's related to who, connecting all the family dots and all the different relations, and just even learning their surname. So then you go, oh, that surname's the same as that one, and so they must be somehow related, and they'll say, oh yes, we are, uncles, nephews, and or distantly related, and just mapping some of that, and remembering who's who. For roots, I think no matter what it is you're doing in a country town, there's a little bit of how long will you be here kind of type thinking. If they only hear that you're here for a year or two, then they might not want to really invest effort into knowing you, in terms of knowing you, setting up a friendship. So I think we've tried to avoid that. People initially asked us and still ask us that question, but we'll just say we're not contracted here. We're looking for schools with the kids. We're here for as long as we'll be here. And being in Darwin for 4 weeks helped us see that, because they have a lot of transient people, fly in, fly out workers, teachers, medical staff, diplomats on placement and pracs and things. And that happens here too with pracs and short stints. And the town wants people to stay. So just knowing that and having that in the back of your mind was helpful, not to give off the wrong impression from the beginning. Other than that, we just did a whole bunch of activities, taking people up on invites. They invited us to see fire things, a burn off, collecting firewood, having a campfire, or sheep things. You shear sheep, you mark sheep, you crutch sheep, you dip sheep, you see potty lambs, which are hand-raised lambs, and then all the machinery. You go harvesting, going on tractors, you go seeding and spraying and windrowing. Because aviation is big in town, we've both been taken up on small 2-person plane flights. I don't think I'd ever get into a small plane in Sydney, but yeah, these are experiences that people will stop asking you after a while, because they think, oh, you've seen what harvest looks like, you've been here for a while, oh, you must have been to the museum and seen all that. And even, recently, a couple of weeks ago, we had the rains. And so, getting taught how to drive through a running creek that was 40 centimeters high, in order to get to a friend's farm, and just realizing this is what happens when it gets really wet, and farming families will have to drive through or get bogged, things like that. And realizing that these activities let you have a chat with them. It lets you see their normal routine, normal activities. It's these things happen throughout the year. Or it's their hobby. And so I'm not sure whether it's just us as a family or a ministry family. We found that people don't go out as often for a meal or invite others for a meal. Not sure whether it's a city, country, or an Asian thing, or my cooking is not so great kind of thing. But I found that doing something together is a chance to connect. And so, just as an example, we invited someone over for a cup of tea, and I said, can you show me how you prune your roses? Because, I didn't really know, but they seemed knowledgeable. And so when you have them over to do that, they have a bit more of a chat.
Yeah, I think that's such a thoughtful idea, Anna, of that idea of kind of doing activities with people. And that we had some interesting discussion around that last night about thinking that through. And maybe how different generations or different cultures, might find the doing of an activity something that, is an easy thing, or more accessible thing than sitting down for a meal. So it's just really interesting to think about that. So, Anna, if you can share, what have been some things that you found difficult and challenging about setting up your life and ministry in Temora?
So initially, when you move, you've got to work out your shopping, where to get things, all the practical things. Also, I think initially it was hard to find friends. So that's why, join so many groups just to meet the people in town, and not realizing, there's certain groups that will hang out together, until, 6 months or a year later, you go, oh, they kind of are friends with those people, and those friends are friends with those people. And so, I think those things are common to anyone starting a new ministry at a new church or anywhere. But having those deliberate trying to find connections was helpful. Another thing that I guess it's different, not necessarily difficult, is learning all the seasons, the cultures, and the traditions. So there's a bit of a different language and culture that I've found in rural Australia. The level of education is different. There's not as much pressure to go into university. There's a lot of trades. And so that was cross-cultural for me from my city professional Asian Chinese background. I did not know a lot of blue-collar workers. And even working out how to speak the gospel is a bit different in those terms too. In terms of language, talking about the weather isn't just small talk. It affects your day-to-day work. Whether you can be on site, whether it's raining, whether it's after rains, when to do the washing because there's a dust storm coming, or, washing your car, or if there's a frost. Things like Boilermaker, I had no idea what that was, but I did know what a welder was, and a Boilermaker is a welder. Machinery language, farming language, adjusting to these different seasons. So there's busy sowing times, harvest times, and there's just times farmers and their families are less available. The wives are often drivers and couriers. After rain times are busy. They're spraying, and if it's raining, that is when you get farmers into church because they can't do anything else. So different cultures like shopping, supporting local, online shopping and shopping at regional stores. You might have to do some of that if you're looking for specific items, but sometimes that grates against my Chinese bargain hunting side. So, having to think just even, where do I go shopping? But also convenience. There's, different commitments with sporting commitments, and particularly on weekends, and, it affects the people in your church. Even though we don't have sporting age kids yet, in the city, a sporting commitment might be, you short drive the length of a game, 60, 90 minutes. But in the country, it can be a 2-hour drive, each way, and then the length of the game. And so, sports will eat up a whole morning or a whole day. And, just being aware of that for ministry, and, you can't discourage everyone from playing sport. But it can be, not just team sports, but sports like lawn bowls or golf or shooting that, a number of older people can play as well. And with some of the, people thinking that you're leaving soon, on the opposite end, there's the people who think that you haven't been in town for long enough, and so you don't quite fit in. And so there's a tension there of how long do you have to be here, and how long are you going to stay here. In terms of different culture, there's also the tradition of I'm Anglican, or I'm Lutheran, or I'm Presbyterian, I'm Catholic, and trying to break down some of those boundaries. Even when inviting people to church, they'll say, oh, I'm this heritage background, but you'll know that they don't go to that church. So they're in their heart, they don't want to feel like they're betraying that heritage by walking into a different church. And in the same vein, there's mixed religion marriages, particularly for different denominations. They might go to a different church, or not the one they grew up with, or the wife doesn't go. There might be non-believing husbands, so often is just the wife there. And with that, Derek's done a lot of pastoral visits to get to know the couple and the family together, and for us to know their family as well as a whole, and keeping that connection, particularly with the husbands. So I think that's a difficulty, but I think we're seeing glimpses of hope. So, couples might go on holidays, and the husband will end up going to church while they're on holidays, or, being willing to drop off and help out with things like that. So that's more impacting our church as well, rather than the community as a whole. But in saying that, our church is predominantly, 70 plus. I was the youngest adult at church for a long time. Derek was the pastor, and he's the next youngest. In surrounding churches, there's about 7 or 8 churches. There's a handful of them with just a handful of people, and some are lay people and very old. But at one stage, there was about 1 preschool family per church. And if we all got together, then maybe we'd have a creche. But, we all went to our different churches, or, they were the ministry family, or whatever. So it was hard to connect, and even figuring out what Sunday worship looked like for us was difficult. So Derek's on the stage the whole time and conducting almost all of the whole service. And I had 2 and then 3 children, and no other preschoolers in the church. The next ones up were in primary school. So not having an idea of, how do we manage that? How do we train people up for worship? How do we train our kids up? Should they be running around? What's a good model for us to look at? We didn't particularly have models like that. Some difficulties with our family in terms of, establishing some space, which I think everyone has to work out if they're, getting married or having children. But for us here, it means an overnight stay, and it's a, particular disruption to our weekly routine. At the moment, we're having about monthly 2-night visits, but we're working on, spacing out visits a bit more, trying to establish some of those boundaries. But on the other side, we have no family babysitters. So, having to find babysitters when I was going into labour with the kids, in the middle of the night, or emergency contacts, when we had funerals with people at church, needing to have friends outside of our church help out, and finding those friends as well initially. So yeah, on that, Derek had 7 funerals that first year. He hadn't conducted a funeral before, or preached at a funeral, or sat in with a minister to learn, what do you do? How do you, go about this? And within 3 months, he had, started having all these funerals to conduct, and to, how do you meet up with people? And so that's on top of all your usual preaching and preparing routines. And so I think he had previous contacts and mentors that he could have bounce a few ideas and some materials off. And so that was helpful, just so he had, a bunch of things that he could look at. And yeah, I think with all those, different challenges here and there, I think flexibility helped a lot, because it just meant that it changes up our week. We could meet up with people differently as we needed. And for him, being a bit flexible, and having time here and there, and everything so close in town, that helps.
It sounds like you guys have had to be very flexible, Anna, in so many ways, and so many firsts. That's just what really strikes me. So many things that you've confronted for the first time, things that you wouldn't have confronted had you have remained in Sydney, and particularly at a season in life when your children are young, and all those adjustments as well. And just a really interesting perspective for me on thinking about what it is to do cross-cultural ministry. I think we often assume that cross-cultural ministry would be, overseas ministry or working with certain, ethnic groups within Australia. But it's very interesting to think about, different ways that, we can work cross-culturally. And from what you're describing, really different ways of understanding life from your own upbringing. So that's so interesting. I've just got one more question, and I really would love to open it up for others to ask some questions or to have some discussion. But my final question for this section, Anna, is can you talk about some things that have been encouraging for you and good about the move and life in ministry in Temora?
I think country life suits us. It's great for the kids. There's lots of space and freedom for them. They've gotten to see a whole bunch of things that, I'd never seen before. Firewood, fires, machinery, jet boats. We've got a lake. They do jet boats out there. Planes, and going in military aircraft, riding motorbikes. Calvin now wants a motorbike for his 5th birthday. The traffic's great. You can walk anywhere in town if you really wanted. Trying different hobbies. We're meddling in some woodwork because of the things we've learned here and being able to get here. And trying a hobby store, making some Christian art and woodwork. Some of that behind me at the top. Engaging people in a different way and having a local Christian presence in the arts and crafts shop and the Christian bookshop that's in town. Temora is generally a really good town, and I found it's hard to out-compete by out-giving or out-supporting a cause. The Red Shield Appeal, Temora has one of the highest giving per capita. And then there's, Can Assist and all these things to do with cancer and volunteering and Rotary. We found that you need the gospel to make an actual point of difference. How does the gospel make a distinctive difference to how you volunteer or where your money goes? Because everyone else in town is doing it so well. So that I think we still need to think about that a bit as well. Other good things are a lot to do with relationship building over time. So we found it's not so much rosters, but that you're in the important moments, growing with people and seeing small steps of change. So, knowing that some people are really uncomfortable praying, and then, you're at a prayer meeting and you're trying to encourage people and they've said a 1-sentence prayer, or everyone said a short prayer, or, after a prayer meeting, you realize, oh, that person prayed for the first time that I've ever heard them pray. Our church really values good Bible teaching because they've not really had much training opportunities. So initially we had 5th Thursday seminars and, did a bunch of, what's grief, anxiety, some church history, different topics, and, people were keen to learn. One of the growth groups is doing the Lord's Prayer, and they said, I've been saying the Lord's Prayer for 70 years, not really known in depth, what it means. But that's really not our doing at all. That was just, we picked that growth group book, that Bible study book, and that's, led them to a deeper understanding of just even the Lord's Prayer. So other good things about church is just pastoring the church as a whole, walking with people and growing, and that gives us a bit of a chance to look at, where we want the future of church to be, and that longer time frame. And for us, I think it was working out a lifestyle or a routine or a pace that suits us as a young family. new in ministry and doing things at our pace. I know sometimes I get frustrated. I did a lot of youth ministry and uni ministry earlier on, and they'll do one a year and then move everyone on, and another year and move everyone on. But just adjusting to a more lifelong, long-term relationship. And Derek, that was good for Derek to adjust as a minister here by himself, pastoring, preaching, learning to do funerals and weddings and starting up different ministries, kids clubs. They also had no expectations of me as a ministry wife to do any ministry. They said turning up to church was good. So I think that helped with some of the pace and involvement in the growth groups, and a lot of the work is behind the scenes with Derek. I think generally just seeing a different side of Australia, not just the big smoke. When people go on holidays, they'll talk about small towns, places I have often not known and I'll have to Google, but they'll just go away and do nothing. Whereas, people from the city might, go to a different city and go and look and see and explore. So I think it's a different kind of rest and learning about a different kind of hard work. There's farmers, there's labourers, lots of small business people, not just office workers. So learning about that, and also, just realising that people know people, and that connection is, I think, missing a little bit in the city. But it's good, you talk about people when you meet them, and people know people.
Thanks, Anna. There's just so much there that, for me as someone who lives in the city, there are just a lot of things for me to be thinking about. And I'm just struck by, just a few things there. I love that idea you were just saying just then about the idea of thinking differently about rest and thinking differently about hard work. That's really interesting, as well. So I'd love to open it up, to us all. If you've maybe got a question for Anna, I think there are some of you who are currently working in regional areas, or maybe you've worked in regional areas or come to New South Wales in the past. You might have some observations of your own, which would be good for us to hear. So, does anyone have any questions or a comment that you'd like to share? Thanks, Beverly. Would you like to?
Just to comment on you asking the lady to help with the roses. We support some missionaries who are trying to, Kath and Colin Puffett, they're in France, and they're trying to reach church plant on this island that's an past industrial area in the middle of a city. And I said, how do you connect to the people? She said, the best way we found is, can you help me with this? And it starts conversations. And so you're putting yourself in a place of vulnerability and saying, I need some help, and people respond to that.
Thanks for that, Beverly. And I think you're right. I think it's sometimes one of the default positions, I think, for us in ministry. We can sometimes think that we need to be the ones who are teaching. And I think the humility in, being a learner is really quite powerful, isn't it, for connection? And it's lovely, Anna, I think, to hear the ways in which you and Derek have, in so many ways, put yourselves out there in new and vulnerable places, as humble learners. I think that's a really powerful lesson for us. Does anyone else have a question or a comment, something that they'd like to ask or share?
I could, yes.
Thanks, Heather. Heather, I don't think we, at the beginning, do you mind just quickly telling us where you're based? I don't think we saw you at the beginning.
No, I was a bit delayed by an unexpected thing.
No problem.
I'm in Grafton, and Grafton's like 20 to 35,000 for the region. It's only somewhere around 25, I think, in town. But I lived in Stroud, which was 550 for the first 13 years of my marriage. And that was a bit more like, very different to Temora because of the industries there. But I'm just really impressed by how well Anna and Derek have done at getting to know such a different, like, so different lifestyle there, isn't it? And it was such a big adjustment for me when I first went to Stroud, because I'd been in a group that Bible study was, when I first became a Christian, Bible study, small groups was all normal. But in the church when we first arrived, it was very much, there was some kind of a small group, but it wasn't something people expected to do really. And they were lovely Christians, lots of them, but there wasn't as much connectedness without those small groups. And it was quite hard to adjust to that different pace and the different level of commitment, and not preparing stuff in advance. And I guess realizing educational level does make a difference to all of that too. So I think sounds like I'm really impressed by how the Lord has helped you adapt. And I don't know how many years you've been there, obviously more than 3, because your children weren't there.
3 and a bit. 3 and a bit.
3 and a bit.
3 and a half, yes.
Yeah, that's just wonderful. I'm really encouraged. And a small community can be so fantastic. Watching them looking after each other, like you said, is just amazing. And we were there as medical people as well, and so for us that was a great advantage. But I think there is still a different level that happens when you have a heart for people's souls. That will be a different thing over time. And as you said, the gospel and the word of God is such an important part of transforming us from where we've been and growing our understanding of ourselves and lots of things. So it's worth persevering, but we were in Stroud for 13 years and we've been here 20. So yeah, I think being there, people in Stroud always said, oh, you're not a local until you've been there 20 years. But we didn't have a problem because they wanted a doctor to live in town, and we were immediately welcomed, whereas I don't think that's what everyone experiences. So yeah, but I just didn't worry about it. I just thought, well, I'm happy to be friendly to you, and eventually you'll be friendly back. Yeah, so well done. I'm really encouraged.
Thanks, Heather. And that's really very interesting to hear your own experience too in a small town. And no, that's really good. Maybe we've probably just got time for maybe one more question or comment, and then I'll get Anna to share a few more questions, and then we'll have a little bit of time at the end as well. Anyone else? Yeah, is there a question? Go for it, Debbie.
Yeah, Anna, my ears just pricked up when you mentioned there being a higher proportion of tradespeople and blue collar workers and that sort of thing. Because my husband Steve, who probably most of you don't know, my husband Steve is the pastor at Young Presbyterian, so not too far from Temora. And he's currently doing some research into why evangelical churches are failing to reach blue collar workers and like that kind of demographic. Because, in evangelical churches, whether in the country or in the city, we tend to be full of kind of professional people and educated, university educated people. So I think it's not a problem just in country towns, but it's kind of probably more of a problem bigger issue because of the demographic of these towns. That's, it's a higher proportion of the population who fall into that category. So I think it's something that in evangelical churches we need to be thinking about that wherever we are. That's about all I've got to say. I don't think he's come to any conclusions in his research as yet. It's fairly recent that he started working on that. But yeah, it's definitely a thing we need to think about in ministry.
Do you have any thoughts there, Anna, on that kind of?
I think, I can see that. There's, I guess a more well-off side of town, and then there's, another side of town that people might not like associating with so much. You might read about them in the newspaper and news reports. We get in our newspaper, we get all the local court write-ups, and everyone's full name is in detail, and their what they got charged with and certain offences. So I think there's a couple of different sides of town, you know, and there's blue collar workers in the middle as well. But there's also, yeah, I think how to reach them, that's a good question. But a lot of the more well-off might be farmers as well, some of the more retired people. So I think it just depends, yeah, people who might have had a tradition of going to church as well, and their backgrounds, and, you know, whether they're still wanting to hold on to some of those traditions as well. And so they have more of a leaning to come to church. And then, yeah, yeah, otherwise, if I think about our church, there's a lot of farmers and tradespeople in our church. And I think learning to speak the gospel in those contexts, I think initially we thought, you know, are we dumbing down the gospel? But, you know, after a while we realized, no, we're not. We're just learning to speak the gospel in a different way that they'll understand. And it's contextualizing, you know, how does this apply to them in their life situation.
Mm.
Thanks, Anna. So another question has come up, but I'm thinking that you might speak to this in the next section. So let me just read it. It's just a question that's come up as a written question, but I'm pretty sure you might answer it. So the question is just saying that how encouraged this person is to hear how you and your family are working hard to shape the way that you live in the community, and do that in a way that's shaped by the gospel. And the question is, can you tell us a bit more about how you're practically doing that? But I'm pretty sure from last night, yeah, you do go into that. Would that be right? That we'll have a look at some practical examples of those connections that you're doing?
I think so. If I don't answer the question, then just ask me again at the end.
I will. So we might keep going, and we'll certainly look at, we'd love to kind of make sure we're looking at some practical examples. That's a great question. So, Anna, my next question is, what are some things that have been surprising or unexpected about life and ministry in Temora? Any funny stories that you might have to share with us?
So recently, I think it was only last week, I had to break into someone's house at night. It was about almost 10 o'clock at night. I was going out to catch a Pokemon that someone had posted about that was in town. So, you know, I turned out the driveway, and I think, oh, there's a person on the street, you know, if there's not that many street lights. And then they're flagging me down, and then I realize, oh, it's a friend. And then, you know, she opens the door, gets in the car and goes, oh, so I was outside moving a few things and the door blew shut and I can't get into the house and the keys are in. And I know she's just had abdominal surgery, and so the windows are a bit high up in a strain. So she asked if I could go. And their phones were too far inside. They could reach the tongs, but they couldn't get to the phones. And they couldn't call anyone. So she just walked up the street and got me because I was a bit smaller and I could fit through the window. So I broke into the house to let them in. And that's because, you know, they knew where we lived and they'd been to our place before. So, you know, I thought I never thought I'd help someone break into someone's house. You know, for fun, we go to garage sales. There's sometimes nothing to do on a Saturday besides sport. You know, we've been to auctions for machinery and tools and other things. You know, one time, Derek, we were at a garage sale and someone goes, "Hi, Father." And he's going, "Oh, I'm no one's father except him." And he's pointing at, you know, Calvin. So people know who we are. You know, and if not specifically who we are, they've got a general idea we're associated with the church. You know, misunderstandings like, you know, I called 000 one time to report a fire. They were doing a burn off and, you know, they were burning off the chaff from the previous year of harvest with their stubble. You know, the gospel's right that the wheat will be gathered up and the chaff will be burned. So, you know, that's not hard to understand for people who actually do this year in the right seasons. And another time, Derek was talking to this bloke and he's saying, "Oh, so every time, you know, someone needs work done, I refer them to you rather than the ones in Wagga." And Derek's thinking, what is he talking about? You know, who are these people in Wagga? And then as they finish up the conversation, he goes, "Oh, see you later, Chris." And he's just been mistaken for the local dentist, who is also Asian. So there's a handful of Asian families, and we've gotten to know a bunch of them in town. And even celebrating little things like Chinese New Year with the Cambodians and some of the other families, because there's not very many of us. But I've probably mistaken people for other people as well. Mixed up all their relations and other things. A bit of another funny thing is a lot of farmers have been strippers and escorts. And it comes back to different language. So they'll strip their crop, and they'll do a harvest, and that's called crop stripping. But the people who drive the oversized machinery behind big, in front and behind big machinery, they're called escorts. So they'll talk about being an escort with the straightest face, and they don't even think that the words might have another meaning. There's lots of funny things. Derek was driving like a quad bike kind of type thing, a buggy, and he'd almost crashed into a small grill bridge, and then the owner was blaspheming, but then yet immediately apologizing profusely, because she knew that we were the ministers. And so just doing little activities to try and keep some connection, but knowing we were visiting their farm at that point, and having a look around, and they'd taken us out and done a campfire thing, but knowing that they're 30-minute drive to church, and 30 minutes for them seems a fair way, even though 20-30-minute drive in the city might not seem that far. I mean, there's lots of different things with Derek. He's Chinese as well, but with a church link, and so he got asked to be on a refugee resettlement committee. I'm not sure whether that was deliberate, but that worked out for him, and he's had a real keen interest in that. I mean, with culture, we've just learned to cook a lot of different food, food from our culture, foods we like eating, things that you can't get any other way, cooking Japanese food, ramen, Chinese, Asian bakery, pineapple buns. We've had to go at Peking duck, I think, as well. We've learned that serving roast pork with crackling is a no-no for older people. And, initially we're like, oh, is it, do you not like pork? And realize that it's just their teeth. They can't eat crackling because it'll break their teeth. I mean, at church, I don't know whether this is funny, but when I arrived, I sat in the back row with the kids, trying to get them to stay seated. And apparently I took the pew of someone's whose pew it was. So, and they've not turned up to church since. I don't really even know what their face looks like. Derek knows who they are. I mean, there might be other issues going on as well. But yeah, there's a lot of ecumenical things that are come up in terms of getting together with other denominations and organising things like World Day of Prayer and combined church services. You've got Palm Sunday and town carols. I think that was a bit unexpected. In the city, you might just work with your denomination and not do so much, but in a town, you're organising all these things together, and scripture and coordinating teachers and things. I think in terms of the media, that we've had a little bit to do with the media. So newspapers, we've got a town paper that comes out Tuesday and Fridays. When we got here, they interviewed us as new residents and, put a big picture on us, wrote an article. But also, just knowing the journalists and being friends with them, getting to submit our own articles. The PWA came for a visit, and, I thought, oh, we've got a picture, we'll do up a little article. And I sent that in, and that ends up in the local paper. And so, you're trying to write bits of the gospel, our love of Jesus, in church-related news, and putting that in. And Derek's written several letter to the editor kind of articles, being a positive voice. We had a bit of to and fro with same-sex marriage debates, and he's writing some things on scripture at the moment. And when COVID happened, we had we contacted the newspaper and said, can we write some articles? And so putting articles about faith in the newspaper, you know, at this time when people need it and they can't go to church. And with that Tomorrow Christian Leaders Group, just inviting everyone else to, you know, put in an article. And so for, I think 7 or 8 weeks in a row, we had articles from each different church, just with a different perspective on the situation. So I think that's been unexpected and a really good thing, you know, whether there was no news in town, and so they just put the articles in. Another thing with the media is being friends with the local radio, the chairman of that radio. And so when COVID shutdowns happened, you know, we rung him and said, can we put our recordings on the radio? And he said, yes, go ahead. You know, we'd had the YouTube, you know, so they just cut it down to Bible reading and the sermon. And so at 8:30 in the morning on a Sunday, we were on, I think within a week of church not happening in person. And then it was so good that 5 or 6 other churches wanted to do it, and they all had their material. So now they've had to move it to midday, and it goes for 2.5 hours of church, like, you know, 5, 6 different churches all in a row. And you know, that was unexpected because it was helpful. We had the older folk not so much able to do the technology or go on YouTube or have the means to do that. But we've also had, you know, friends on tractors listening. So trying to consciously go, we want to put the gospel out there, and not necessarily evangelistic, it's just the normal Sunday service. But to put it out there, and you don't know, you know, who's listening, who might be traveling through. In terms of, I think what Heather said a little bit before, our family participated in a music video in an ad campaign for a new GP in Temora, the Great Quack Quest. It was a long time of shooting and learning dance moves that I thought we were just extras in the back or whatever. But it was 5 hours of the kids, long time of waiting. A new experience for us, doing a music video. And the reason for the campaign is that there is a dire need for doctors and GPs in rural areas. So, you know, if you're a GP in a rural town, everyone will know you. And you will have instant sway as a trusted authority in their lives. So there's great opportunities for Christian doctors to have significant influence in rural towns. And I think what Heather said before with the care for the soul as well, and you know, having that bigger picture of not just your physical health, but your spiritual health. I think lots of unexpected things in terms of media and trying new things.
So many things, Anna. Like, I'm just loving all your examples, and yeah, life has obviously been very full. With so many different experiences. Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Sometimes people might have the assumption that, moving to the country must be, quiet and boring, but just the kinds of things that you've been exposed to and you've kind of thrown yourselves into. I mean, so many rich and new experiences. It's really lovely to hear the way that you've so intentionally involved yourselves in so many things. So another question I've got is, could you share with us some of the main things that you think God has been teaching you and maturing you in over these last few years during your time in Temora?
So I think I've learned a lot about how to understand the Bible. And so some of the things I'll say now, that, I don't have a new thought every week. It might, take a couple of months for me to realize something, but, I'm giving them to you as a list. So it might, so I think I've learned a lot from farming, that a lot of the Old Testament laws really do make sense. They're still really good farming practice. So, learning that God's way is best, and then, even learning from farmers and trying to do it in our own yard. I've learned how expensive a cow is. It's about $1,000 a head at the moment, versus a sheep, which is about 100 or a bit more. So when you save up for a fattened calf that will sell well, that really actually is a sacrifice. Cows eat a lot, they drink a lot, they take lots to maintain, they're expensive. And so saving up a fattened calf that, instead of saving it, but sacrificing that to God, that's a real sacrifice. Reading that the local farmer, some sheep have been killed and, to replace them, that farmers do that now, and then realizing, oh, they already said that in Leviticus. You know, so if you or your animals injure someone else or maim someone else, then you should replace and compensate them for, you know, their animals. And so, you know, just realizing, oh, that still comes into play today. Just knowing how much farmers really do care for their sheep, you know, hand raising the ones that, you know, don't have mothers to look after them, and doing everything to keep them healthy, you know, looking for them when they're lost, you know, that happens. And then also realizing that sheep are heavy. So in the lost sheep story, the sheep gets put on the shoulders. You know, that's a big thing. That's a big deal, you know, to put a sheep on your shoulders because you're so happy that you've found this sheep. You know, things about keeping a fire going. In Leviticus 6, 12 to 13, it says the fire on the altar must be kept burning. It must not go out. And, you know, we had a wood fire earlier, and, you know, trying to keep the fire going and making sure that it's going, and then you chuck a big log in there and it doesn't light. You know, just little things like that. Realizing, oh, you know, there was someone's job to keep this fire on the altar going. And it was so important because it was the way for Israelites to offer sacrifices to God. You know, I talked about the burn off earlier, that, you know, the chaff is gathered up and burned. So, you know, some of those concepts are not hard to explain, and not hard for someone to understand, because they're seeing this play out, you know, day to day. Some things like risk versus faith. You know, is it really a risk if I'm going to sow this crop? Is it going to grow? You know, is it going to rain this year? Is it not going to rain? Yeah, and then you've sown it, and you're just kind of waiting for, you know, farmers are waiting for the rain, and it's rain at the right times, and realizing that it really is God that makes it grow. You know, you can only do so much in terms of weighing up your odds, but in the end, you know, trusting God. You know, learning how much a crop yields, you know, 100, you know, 30, 60, 100-fold. You know, those kinds of things, and that resting the land is an important farming practice even now. You know, rotating crops and resting land. I had another thought that I had during just personal Bible reading, and then matching that with things learned, was in 1 Samuel 12, the Israelites had asked for a king, and so this is Samuel's speech. In verse 16, it says, "Now then, stand still and see this great thing the Lord is about to do before your eyes. Is it not wheat harvest now? I will call on the Lord to send thunder and rain, and you will realize what an evil thing you did in the eyes of the Lord when you asked for a king." Then Samuel called on the Lord, and that same day the Lord sent thunder and rain. So all the people stood in awe of the Lord and of Samuel. The people all said to Samuel, "Pray to the Lord your God for your servants, so that we will not die, for we have added to all our other sins the evil of asking for a king." You know, city-centric background, I mean, it's just rain, right? But realizing that rain during a wheat harvest, rain at a wheat harvest time is bad. It means you can't harvest, and if you get too much rain, it damages crops and it will reduce yield. And if it rains so much and gets so much moisture, it will spoil the crop for the next season. For the next year, it means you have no food, and then you have no seeds to sow for the next year. And this is, you know, not just one farm on one place; it's the whole, you know, the whole nation. So, you know, realizing that the Israelites asking for a king is really that bad of a deal, and, you know, God doing a physical act to show what it looks like. So yeah, just all of those farming imagery and things, you know, realizing that all these concepts, if not in Sydney and Australia, there's a lot of around the world, they're still really rooted in these concepts, and, you know, understanding that the Bible really is in layman's language. And yeah, maybe we haven't seen it as more middle class, you know, professional people in the cities, but just getting a bit of that taste for it. So that's a lot of what I've learned about a different understanding, a different way to understand the Bible. Some other things are just, you know, being faithful rather than just looking for fruit. it takes persistence and patience, and sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 back. And also just realizing that change takes time. You know, some of these people have been in the same church, even maybe the same seat for 50 years. You know, we had hot summers, 40 plus summers. You know, by 9 o'clock, we're the earliest church, it's already high 30s. You know, there was air conditioning in the hall, and we'd decided that if it was forecast to be higher than 40, we'll move church into the hall, just for the sake of some people's health, because, you know, a couple of weeks before we were seeing people not doing so well in our older congregation. And yet knowing that some people are saying it's not church in the big main church building, so they won't come, and, you know, and just seeing that, but also, yeah, just knowing that sometimes it's an older congregation. I might have a bit of the, yeah, let's meet up and train you and try and send you out kind of mentality. But it's harder to achieve in an older congregation. You know, in our 2.5, it was up to 2.5 years, and I was allowed on the piano for the first time because the 2 regular players that play, you know, they alternate every week. They were away for holidays, and then the backup who plays when they're both away had broken her wrist, and that had been that for a long time. And, you know, previously I was playing on a, you know, weekly or monthly basis, so, you know, that was a big change for me. But having Derek there, and just him as a counterbalance, and seeing that bigger picture, and the longer road, and you know, balancing some of the fights and the sensitivities in relationships. I think at that point, up then we were getting new Bibles, and so we just prioritized new Bibles, putting them in people's hands during church, versus, oh, let's try and get Anna on, you know, music or something. I think just some other maturity things were, you know, when you're at college and training, you're taught about pastoral issues in church, but, you know, really learning that and experiencing that with people in all their messes. You know, we've been here 3.5, almost 4 years, and it's taken this long for people to really open up about some of the things in their life, whether it's some of their current issues or things from, you know, in their past. And yeah, knowing that some of the more shorter term transient ministries, you know, year on year kind of ministries, it's different, that you don't get this kind of deeper, longer opportunity for people to open up as they're comfortable. So yeah, just maturity in terms of ministering, and learning things like that.
Thanks, Anna. Yeah, I'm really encouraged just to, again, think about the value of, you know, long, slow, faithful, patient ministry, and just getting alongside people in the mess of their lives. And I think that's so true. I think often we can assume, you know, ministries will look a certain way and that will achieve certain things, but often it's the humility, isn't it, of walking in the reality of where God's placed us. So that's really helpful. And those farming analogies and the way that God's been showing you about himself and revealing himself through his word, and through you being there, yeah, you know, kind of amongst, yeah, that farming imagery is really lovely. So my final question for you, Anna, and then we should have a little bit of time for other people to ask some questions. What would be some of the key things that you would like for us to learn or be challenged by today?
So, you know, ministry in a rural area, and I mean, we're rural, ministry in Sydney, and then ministry in a regional centre, that they might all look different compared to where you are. It might look similar. I think there's lots to learn about understanding the Bible and connecting with people, and how to apply that gospel in everyday life. But I think if you can adapt to a new job or a new church, or just trying different things, knowing that there are people who want to take a move, make sea change, tree changes, and maybe thinking up some of those people who are wanting to make a move, even if it's not yourself. I think this session helps if you have a chat with them. Rural areas need Christians, and they need Christians who aren't just ministry workers. So, you know, your teachers, your policemen, you know, people who work down at the water. You know, we just need Christian people, and having that chat with them, and learning some of this, and having some of this conversation to help you have a conversation with someone else. I think I would like to say to send well. I mean, in terms of connecting with Christians who are moving into areas nearby. So chatting with people who are wanting to go or needing to go on short-term placements, and seeing that as an intentional time to invest in that town now. I think it's really important to do that, and to do that well. If you're a sending church, send them off to prac or placement or their, short contract, but empower them and encourage them, pray for them and learn from them. Contact the church or the minister beforehand, so that, they can keep an eye out or catch up with them when they're there. We've done that with some of the people in nearby towns as well. We've gotten contacts from friends, and, we tried to chat with them and catch up with them. There's a great need for younger Christians in rural areas. And there's heaps of young people in our town, a lot of retired people, but also young people. But, it's really hard to transition them into church, even though they're, coming to our kids club and our mainly music groups. So anybody who's younger, which is anybody under 70, kind of gives hope and a bit of life to existing churches. And, if other families walk in, then it's just more younger faces, and that helps even to build, Sunday school for a little bit. You've got an extra kid, so you're not asking the same two kids the same questions. So we've seen a situation where someone drives back to Melbourne, 5 or 6 hours away, every fortnight to be on the music roster at their home church. But they've been here for a year, and I think it's just draining on them, and it limits connecting. So, we tried to chat with them, just to encourage, why don't you try and build a bit more connection here? And whether, COVID happened at the right time, they've been coming to a bit more growth group and trying to build a bit more relationship, because they just can't get away at the moment. Time away in a new environment is a good chance, for personal development and for exploring. But I'd say for Christians, use that as a time to invest and to serve in a different context. There's lots you could learn, and lots you'd probably bring into a small town. So if you have people in mind, then, who are thinking or in these situations, then have a chat with them. And then when they come back, let them do some sharing and interviews, because it will help them digest what's going on. And it also teaches the rest of the congregation about life in a different context and an area. And it expands the view of the congregation as well. I think this was a bit of the practical things. Make the most of the opportunities. If people don't invite you, invite them, make an excuse, get someone to help you out with something. Try new things, the newspaper, radio packages, care packages, even if it's a letterbox drop. I think now in this season of time is the time to try things, and just join different clubs or try hobbies. Chat with people when you're at the shops. That widens some of the contacting community. I never thought that Pokemon would be a thing, but some of those things you physically have to be in the same location to do a battle, and our church is one of those spots. So one time they were saying, oh, let's get together, and it would just happen to be after church service on a Sunday at morning tea time. And so, I finished church, I wandered out, joined them for this battle, and I said, why don't you all come in for a cup of tea? We're having morning tea. And so 4 people walked in the church hall, and all these people at church are going, what's going on? So they just walked in and had a cup of tea. And it's just helping people familiarize themselves with being in a church building and going, oh, it's not that foreign. One of them was in a dressing robe because he'd just woken up, and trying to build some of that contact and relationship with them, over time. So that's making most of the opportunities and the people you're connected with. I'd say also make the most of the training opportunities and conferences you've got, especially if you're in the city, because there's really not that much opportunity out where we are in the rural areas. To attend an in-person conference these days, it's like a 2 or 3 hour drive to a regional centre. and even convincing people to go, you know, to make a day of a drive, attend a conference and come back, is hard. And so anyone who's been to, you know, a handful of conferences will have had more training and equipping than a lot of the people in town. And the last thing I'd say is to consider coming or going further than where you're comfortable. And it may take years. For us, it took a long time, but keep it in the back of your mind. It might be a seed that grows. The gospel is, you know, really does need to be passed from generation to generation, and especially in the country. Otherwise, they won't know who God is and what Christ has done for them. And I thought I'd just end by reading this bit in Matthew 9, verse 35. Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field."
Thank you, Anna. That is, like, it really is a very, very strong and thoughtful challenge for us as we think about how we might best serve Jesus and serve his kingdom. Thank you for the time I know you've taken in preparing such thoughtful and insightful responses to those questions. Really appreciate, the fact that we can just learn from, you know, years of your thinking and that kind of distillation of your knowledge. We've just got a few minutes left before we'll finish, and I might ask just if one or two people would like to pray for Anna and for ourselves before we leave. But there is time just for a few questions. Does anyone have a question or even a comment or an observation from your own experience that might resonate or gel?
Linda here, and
just, hi,
hello Heather too, especially. Just putting out there that there is indeed an SRE high school position available in our town, and Heather Bradshaw mentioned how you know, it's quite a large regional centre, both near the sea and near the rainforest, etc. So that is there, and my I guess prayer is that indeed of all that wonderfully taught and abundant group in Sydney, I don't mean those on the today's conference, but just through networking, that opportunity to serve in a regional area with significant Indigenous students and juvenile justice nearby, etc. But it is a hungry place in the country, and just the work we do across the state with PY, indeed, the city people have that richness that Anna's told us about today in coming and giving, and also that learning of that other culture. And those such practical things. Thank you, Anna. And that need is there at the moment, should you know anyone who might be able to plug into that. That's just one example. There's heaps I know, but that's a very local and immediate one.
Thanks, Linda. If you've got a copy of that job advertisement, I could actually post it onto, there's a women's ministry website. So just you will have my email address. So just post that to me and I can pass that on.
Wonderful.
We'll receive some attention.
Thank you. And we're doing that for all SRE too, with the Bible colleges, etc. Because now is the time for this. It's really
absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll switch myself off.
Was Joy, did I notice you had a question?
Just a comment for Anna. Firstly, it's wonderful to see your enthusiasm and your commitment to the community. We lived in the country areas in rural West Wyalong for 12 months, where I also had interaction with the folk at Temora, and at Corowa for 15 years. Don't be discouraged if people won't share. As we moved out, the truck was being packed with all our stuff, one of the men in the congregation who'd worshipped there came to talk to my husband while we were packing round him, because he suddenly realised that there wouldn't be a minister in town in that denomination for at least another 12 months. And, you know, 15 years, opportunity, been out to the farm and had lots of one-on-one time. But that was when something that had been burdening this chap for many years was the time he took to share. So don't be discouraged if people won't share. And sometimes your best friends from these country areas come after you leave the country area, because you are the ministry family and they're looking on you to support them, not for them to support you. So in a real sense, you're missionaries there. And the other comment is, don't overextend yourself. Your children are little, and as they grow bigger, they're going to need more of your time and commitment, especially with Calvin starting school. There'll be all the school activities. So pace yourself now, because your time's going to get smaller in another sense as you go along. God bless you. The enthusiasm's wonderful. And don't forget, Temora also has horse racing. Wasn't it, Paleface Adios?
Yes.
Came from Temora and you missed it. Yeah, so you've got a racing pictures there too. Yes, God bless you. Yeah.
Thanks, Joy. Probably time for just one more comment or question, if anyone would like to ask anything of Anna.
Oh, just a little comment.
Yeah.
I was riding my push bike round Temora and I came across the handcraft shop there. Is it still going?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
the Temora Arts and Crafts. Yep.
I had a really good conversation with one of the ladies there. We got onto spiritual things. It was good.
I think you were saying earlier, Anna, that you've had a bit of a connection at that, the arts and craft. You've been able to do.
Yes, so some of the things that we've made, I've ended up putting it in there, and we've deliberately put a Bible verse on all the things that we make, and you know, putting Christmas trees that turn into crosses, and knowing that some of the people, a lot of the people who are volunteering there as well are, you know, part of churches. So yeah, a lot of people, when they pass through, they'll go and have a cruise in there and have a look, because it's the, you know, things that are made by locals and produce from locals. So, you know, that's just another connection point.
She was sitting out the front on her spinning wheel on a Saturday afternoon.
Yes.
Which was quite interesting. Yeah.
It's lovely to hear about all those points of connection, you know, as you were talking about with the arts and crafts and the newspaper and the radio. Yeah, it's really lovely to hear the ways in which you're using those points of connection, you know, in order to connect and to live through the gospel in those things. It's really, yeah, really interesting to think about those opportunities. So I'm just wondering, yeah, would one or maybe two people be willing to help us to close in prayer? Particularly think it'd be lovely to pray, I guess, for ourselves, that we might be challenged and reflect on what Anna has shared, but also that we would be able to pray for Anna and Derek as well, and for their kids in their ministry. Would there be one or two people that might be willing to put a hand up? Would that be okay, Heather? Thanks, yep. Heather. Anyone else? I mean, you don't have to, but I'm just wondering, anyone would like the opportunity to pray? Thanks, Debbie. So maybe just Heather and Debbie will finish. Yeah, Heather first, then Debbie, and we should be able to finish right on time. Thank you both.
Heavenly Father, we're thankful for all that you've done in Anna and Derek's life and the children's lives even now, and thank you for the insights of such a different place, and also all the ways in which you've equipped them in the past, in their city life and their family life before. And Lord, thank you that you use all these things to make connections with others. And we do pray that you would prosper those connections that are there already, and guide and continue to walk with Anna and Derek. Lord, that the light of the gospel will be growing stronger and stronger in that town. Lord, we pray that you would unlock those hesitations and the things that stop people getting onto the deeper issues. Australians are very good at those superficial conversations, but not so good at the deeper ones. And Lord, we pray that you would grant many opportunities for connections that will build that trust that's needed, and also, Lord, the vulnerability of sharing about hard things, that there would be a sense of just sharing with another human who's also vulnerable, Lord, and that Anna and Derek would be able to share the gospel in the context of those sort of deepening relationships. We thank you that you are the one who opens hearts and changes them. And we pray that there would be opportunities that have already been started through the radio and other ways for people to hear the message, and I guess for something in the scriptures to touch people's hearts, and for there to be growth. We think of the church and ask that younger people would come there, and that there would be increasing numbers of a range of ages in the congregation. And just thinking about that, Lord, I pray for the children that they would have friends and really good connections in the community, but that there would also be children that are in the congregation, people that they will end up sharing their faith with, having a common faith with other peers. We pray for your provision for the kids, that they would grow and know you and come to be men and women of God as well. Lord, we commit to all these things to you through your wonderful Son. Amen.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for Derek and Anna's willingness to go somewhere so different from what they were used to. We thank you for all the positive experiences that they've had so far in Temora. And we pray that you will bless that willingness to step out into the unknown. We pray that you will grant them fruitful ministry there. We pray that you'll be speaking to the people of Temora loud and clear through, not only through Derek's preaching and the overt gospel ministry that they're involved with, but just through the lives that they lead and the everyday contacts that they have with people around them. We thank you for all the creative ways that that they have thought of and been bold enough to pursue, to be getting your word out into the town of Temora. We pray that that will bear much fruit in the future. We pray for the town of Temora, Lord, that you will have mercy on the people of that town and bring many to faith in Jesus. We pray all these things in your Son's name, Lord. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you all for being a part of today's living room. It really is a great delight and a great encouragement to have people, joining and sharing. And it's, again, lovely that we're all from different parts of the state. And it's lovely to hear some of your own experiences currently, as well as in the past in country New South Wales. So I've learned a lot personally. And thank you, Anna, again, on behalf of all of us, just for your honesty, your clarity of thinking, for being willing to share what God is teaching you, and also being able to share your thinking in what's brought you and Derek to where you are now. So it's a great blessing for us to learn from your wisdom and experience. So thank you so much. If anyone has any questions that they didn't get to ask and they'd like to ask Anna, you can always send that through to me. I think you've got my email. You will have received that with the link today at the Women's Ministry Facilitator. And certainly I can pass that on to Anna, and she's probably, if she's happy to, you could have her contact details if she's willing. So feel free, if you'd like to continue some kind of conversation, you can do that through me to begin with. Anyway, lovely to see you all. Enjoy the rest of your day. And again, thank you, Anna, on behalf of all of us for your time and your preparation. And thank you all. Hopefully we can see you at the next living room, which will be coming up in a month or two. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
See you. Bye.